Hello, this is Jensen. You might also know me as the best mid lane in LCS, or at the very least you will soon enough, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
TSM, formerly known as Team Solo Mid, is a North American team organisation that has won 7 of the 17 LCS splits held to date, but as I'm going to explain in this video, they could have run the table with smarter general manager play, but more importantly, better abuse or let's say exploitation of Riot's residency rules and potentially won even more. Because here's the thing, I do actually think overall TSM was well general managed, GM'd prior to Season 9, but only if we ignore the residency loophole and the massive advantage it actually would have granted to TSM if they'd exploited it the whole time. Because they had advantages, namely Bjergsen being an NA resident, that no other team had in context during these splits. Instead, over this span of time, you had Team Liquid get 4 titles of their own, Cloud9 won 4 titles of their own, even CLG grabbed a couple of titles. Then you look when TSM's titles come, not many are in the latter day, and so you see that actually even when they finally started exploiting this loophole, it was kind of a bit late and they weren't even winning domestically anymore. And that's the one thing TSM did, because 3 of their LCS titles, one was with Reggie, came in the first 5 splits. 3 of them then came between 2016 and 2017. They won 3 splits in a row from summer and then all of 2017. And then in the last 7 splits, they've won 1 title and they've only been in the finals twice. And this is just domestic. This is LCS, the worst in theory of the 4 major regions that exist at this point in time. So to me, they've blown their chance already. That window has closed. Bjergsen doesn't play for them anymore. Maybe he could come back one day, but even then, he's not as far ahead of the league in his position as he once was during the time we're going to talk about here. Because the problem is, even when TSM did win the domestic split, they are the ultimate team to be the number 1 seed, go to Worlds and fucking bomb it, go to MSI, do nothing. They are the most pitiful domestic championship team that NA has ever had. I mean, the amount of times they've been number 1 world seed. Let's face it, the one time out of 6 appearances at Worlds in this time frame, obviously, I'm not counting like Season 2 and stuff, where they were already seeded into the round of 8, there was no LCS in that period, and therefore the residency shit was irrelevant. They've been to Worlds 6 times, and they made it out of groups once, and that was when the main rival for second place in the group had one of their best players banned for half the games. Other than that, 5 times they went there, fuck all happened. Cloud9 in that time frame, they had 4 times they progressed from the group stage. They made the round of 8 4 times technically, because 1 time they went to the semis as well. Now, I'm not counting, by the way, when you go back to, I think it was Season 3 where they were auto-qualified to the round of 8. I'm not even counting that one. TSM at MSI, they went there twice. Admittedly, one was with Wild Turtle, but they won the split. They got out of the groups 0 times. Team Liquid went to 2 MSIs and made the final in one of them. CLG made the final in 1 appearance out of 1 appearance. So you see, domestically, they're ahead, but some of those titles come from the old days. Other than that, it's fairly neck and neck once you get past the first few splits with a bunch of orgs. Team Liquid, Cloud9, and then the problem is, Cloud9, TSM, and Team Liquid all have better international results than TSM. So what is one of the reasons why? It's because TSM, except for certain splits that I will give them credit for, I would say beginning of Season 6, I would say all of Season 8, they never actually made, I think, a really good attempt to build the best international roster, and part of it was not abusing this overall approach, and hence the international results were always underwhelming, always quite pitiful actually considering the number of domestic championships. So let's just explain a little bit this whole residency issue for people who don't know. So one of the problems in League of Legends is they didn't want to just allow any amount of imports to come in once it got to Season 4. Because earlier in Season 4, actually it was for the summer of Season 4, an entire team of Chinese players, LMQ, came over, all 5 Chinese players, qualified to the LCS, and actually went to Worlds as an NA slot team, and quite frankly, were, I think, on course to even win that split in the playoffs, but they lost in 5 games to TSM in the 5th game. Now, Riot looked at this, and they were like, we don't want just 5 Chinese players representing LCS, and similarly, there were rumours at the time that certain people who were, I mean, I won't say the names, but there were certain key esports figures who were looking to potentially bring over 5 Koreans. Like, I heard rumors that at the time, people who were like starting to drop off in Korea, like Mad Life, some of these sick players, Shy, that these players were up for coming to NA, again, doing an LMQ, making a 5 Korean team, and just trying to qualify, get into LCS, then just be the champions from LCS and go to Worlds still. So Riot closed the door on them. They made this residency rule, and you could only have 2 imports from Season 5 onwards, technically the end of 2014. And the way the rule worked went like this. The first initial one was around September 2014, and it basically changed what had been the original approach, which was originally you just declared what region at the beginning of your career, and then that was your region. So when they made this ruling from September 2014 to May 2015, the ruling was you must live in the region for 2 years. And then if you look at more specifics, at the same time in September 2014, they made this ruling. They grandfathered in, I think it was 12 players. I can actually bring them up on screen in a second. All the rules was you had to have started for an LCS team in 2014. You had to be on a current active LCS roster of an LCS team, or started for a Challenger Series team in the Summer Challenger Series 1 playing onwards, or was on an active roster of a team participating in the Summer Promotion Tournament. So if you go and look at the people that were on this list, these are the grandfathered in players. So you have Amazing, who only played 1 split at that point in time. You have Bjergsen, who's played 2 splits at this point in time. You have Dexter, who's played 1 split, I think it was for CLG. You have Helios, who's played, or maybe he played 2 split. You had Helios, who barely played. You had Keen, who was fairly fresh, of course. Crepo, obviously, he'd only been there with EG that year. Lost Boy had been on TSM for 1 split, not even a full split. Quaz obviously was on Curse. Thorin, he actually was in a Challenger Series at this point in time, would later go on to be on TSM. Seraph was on CLG for 1 split. Zhao was obviously on LQ for 1 split, and Keox is listed as China there, but that's because he was being silly. He wasn't actually an LCS player at that point in time. He just changed that for the rules because he wanted to potentially play in China in the LPL. He just never got around to doing it as far as I know. So the interesting thing about this is, they made that initial set of rulings, and you look at that list there. Listen, some of those players at the time were good players, but those players, none of them have the longevity Bjergsen does as an elite player in the region. None of them were as influential from their position as Bjergsen was, especially not for as long over his career. They just had splits where they were good or splits where it worked out, etc. And so of those names, the second this happened, September 2014, you grandfather in Bjergsen, if you're Reginald, if you understand the way League of Legends works, I know people are going to go, it's all hindsight. No, we already knew the Koreans were dominant by the end of Season 4. They were already fantastic even in Season 3 and Season 2. At this point in time, you got to exploit the fact that you're the only one who has basically the MVP of the league as just an NA resident. You have to now stack 2 sick imports. Doesn't have to be Koreans, could be Europeans all the time. And that's not only how you're going to continue to be dominant domestically, but you're going to do things internationally, because EU has gotten out of groups a bazillion times at Worlds, has done all sorts of special things, and has all the positions that everyone needs in NA. Jungle support, every fucking position in the game, let's be real. So then, there was a third update to the residency rules, which was from May 2015 to August 2016, and that was that you had to have played in 8 out of 12 splits, and to count as playing in a split, you had to have started in at least 50% of your LCS games in the regular part of the split. The past didn't count towards that. All the other past things and grandfather, that was irrelevant. And post August 2016, then the rule became basically like this. It just said, if a player becomes a lawful permanent resident of a region after having played in it as a non-resident, he may petition for IMP, which was like International Movement Policy or something, resident status with his region's league administrator. So it's not, the rule wasn't specifically just for LCS, it technically count for LPL as well. But the point here is, now if you get a green card or something, you can just come anywhere, no matter what happened before that. And so the interesting thing is, you look at what's on screen now, that means that a bunch of these people all eventually got their residency. But look how many years later they are getting their residency. The earliest one here is 2018. There's a bunch of people 2019. There's some that ones that like Hooney was in 2020. Someday only just got it now in 2021. Alexic would have to play again, but obviously he played for a couple of splits. Now, speaking of missed windows, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a little something since I have the attention of so many of you TSM fans. Guys who just see the world in black and white and simple chants, TSM, TSM. But you know what? There's so much colour to the world, guys. There's so much elegance and beauty. Like if green's your colour, envious of teams like, Team Liquid, Cloud9, how about trying out Sour Apple from Gamersubs? It's delicious. It's got that little tang that leaves you feel a little bit sour. Kind of like when you read one of my tweets or watch one of these straight fire videos. If you're more of a true blue guy, you just love Bjergsen and Reggie, how about check out Blue Raz? I'm certainly razzing your fucking team right now, aren't I? But if you want a subtle but developed taste, so you TSM fans know fuck all about this, but maybe you want to aspire to be more, you want to be like a Cloud9 fan maybe, perhaps Watermelon Ice is for you. It doesn't hit you in the face with a sledgehammer with the taste, it's just subtle, but it's nice, it's delicious, it's got something to it, it grows on you over time. Get 10% off a third of the titles Reggie Blue by using the code Thorin, THORIN, at gamersubs.gg. It might even help you focus enough to make sure your boyfriend isn't streaming when you have a phone call about a player transfer. Now, the idea that TSM didn't exploit Bjergsen being an NA resident for all these years when the guy was grandfathered in from basically the end of summer 2014 is nuts to me. Because there were 13 splits since then, and they didn't make use of being able to stack the deck with Bjergsen and 2 imports for 5 of those 13 splits. So that's just over a third. It's 38.46% of the splits they played when Bjergsen essentially occupied this loophole. So in Season 5, Spring and Summer, they had Thorin, but he was a resident. And they had Lost Boy as their import, so they could have had another import player. In Season 6, Summer, they obviously had gotten rid of Yellow Star, so they had Svenskeren, and they could have had another import. Same for Season 7 Spring, Season 7 Summer. They also could have had another import there because it was only Svenskeren. So there are 8 splits though, as referenced by the stat I gave earlier, where they did do this. Like in Season 6 Summer, they had Yellow Star and Svenskeren. In Season 8 Spring and Summer, they had Mithy and Sven as their bot lane. In Season 9 Spring and Summer, they had Sven and Broken Blade. In Season 10 Spring, they had Broken Blade and Kobe. In Season 10 Summer, for most of it, they had Broken Blade and Treats. In Season 11 Spring, the most recent one, they had Huni, Resident. They had Lost, now technically a resident. And then they had 2 imports. They had Power of Evil and Sword Art, and the irony is Season 11's actually the closest they came to really trying to stack the deck, but because they ended up with players like Huni, but not when he was like a standout compared to the league, and Lost, who quite frankly is just as good as NA players, they didn't even really make that great use of it then. So think about this in terms of Bjergsen. He was the best player, arguably in the league, or an MVP candidate, for practically his whole career in LCS. So for 13 splits, he was treated as if he was an NA player. But who were his rivals in terms of like best player, like stand out of their position? Well, Doublelift's an obvious one, right? But Doublelift is always a resident because he's from America. So among carries, Doublelift's your main rival and he's already a resident, hence why they actually had him on the team. Then, by the way, there's another area that's mad as well. They also could have stacked the deck, and then for their NA players, they could have had one of the NA players, you only need to have 2 at that point in time, one of them could have been Doublelift, who's already as good as some of the imports. So then, you think, well, Jensen was his obvious rival in mid lane, right? Jensen didn't become a resident until the end of Season 9 Spring. What about when Piglet was a stud at AD carrying Season 6, I think it was, and parts of Season 5? He didn't get a residency until end of Season 8. How about when Huni was a monster with Immortals and pretty good in Echo Fox? He didn't get residency until the end of Season 10, hence why he's a resident now for TSM. Players like, good players at times, Froggen, MVP candidates or winners, Rush, Rainover, they're still not residents to this day. So if Bjergsen, think about this, was best or tied best with Jensen, but Jensen is an import, hence why Cloud9 couldn't have Impact, Rush, Jensen all in one lineup, and Rush's career effectively ended. So due to this residency, it's actually unfair we're even comparing Bjergsen with the others. Technically, Bjergsen's competition for his slot was people like Pobelter, Huhi, Keen, Golden Glue, Demonte, Shifter, High. These were the people who were actually the residents who Zhao if he'd have stayed longer. Now, to me, first of all, this is bullshit that this loophole even existed, particularly in the way that it favoured TSM. Because due to the class of people who I pointed out earlier who got grandfathered in and then the rule changes, it meant that plenty of people who could have benefited other teams and allowed them to exploit these loopholes, like Cloud9, they didn't get to. They had to wait many more splits, as opposed to Bjergsen, who got grandfathered after playing 2 whole splits. So Jensen had to play 8 splits in a row before he got residency. Hooney played 8 out of 10 splits and got residency. Phoenix still doesn't have it, even though he played many splits. Power of Evil has played 7 splits and still doesn't have it. Froggen has played 8 out of 10 splits before he got residency. He would have it if he was to play now. And Someday just got it now and played in 8 out of 9 splits. And he was in the LCS for one of them. He just only played a few games and then they benched him because they had the issues, again, with the import slot things. So think about the havoc this has wreaked across the rest of the league, the tough decisions. And TSM didn't even have to make some of these decisions. And they just chose not to exploit the advantage. I mean, they are actually technically exploiting the loophole now twice, with obviously not the residency one, but now that the minor region in terms of like Oceania doesn't count, they get to have Lost as though he was an NA player. He isn't. And they get to have Hooney. Problem is, Hooney's not as far ahead of his position or the league as Bjergsen was during the prime years. So if you look at some of the possibilities, let's look at some of the lineups they had back in the day and see what could have happened. So the first split where they could have exploited this was Season 5 Spring. Now, this is a split where they won the split, but they were shit at MSI, and later on, we're going to talk about Season 5 Summer, but at Worlds, they also weren't great either, guys. So this is one where domestically they were good enough, slightly ahead of the rest of the pack, or good in the playoffs, but they weren't a team that internationally could do fucking anything. So let's look at the lineup they had then. So they had Dyrus still, they brought Thorin in, who'd been a challenger previously, but he counts as a resident. Bjergsen, resident. They've only got one import here. It's Lost Boy, their support player. So basically, they could already have kicked Dyrus and brought in any number of players. They could have brought in Odoamne, a player that the year before me and Monty were looking at to potentially join CLG. They could have brought all sorts of names in. Kevin from Millennium, who at the time was a good player. They could have tried to get Wicked from Alliant. There's a million angles. Listen, I know elite Europeans often didn't want to go. You could have also gotten people in the region who were playing these positions who were very, very good players. Didn't go for most of them, or did you? You could have been the guys who went for Impact. We'll get to that later, but obviously Reggie doesn't believe in the Korean angle, except for Lost Boy, which is mainly a Loco Doka move to get them out of the fire when Cloud9 were the dominant team, right? So, okay, you look at that, then you go, there's the summer lineup. The summer lineup was the same lineup, obviously. They could have replaced Dyrus. I think for summer, they probably already should have replaced Thorin. He'd already started to show issues then. But okay, I guess it was mainly during the split, so we can sort of give them a break. That just counts like the Season 5 one. I also just wonder, should they ever have even had Thorin in the first place? That could have been a very good European jungle at that point in time. So then you go and you look, this is Season 6 right now. Season 6 Summer, so obviously it's the one after Yellow Star left. They brought in Biofrost. Even though his flag says Chinese, he's counted as an NA resident. The only import here is Svenskeren. So they could have had some super sick EU support player. Let's think of the time period. They tried out Kasing at one point in time. He used to be very good. You could have had something like, let me think. You could have had like maybe a ErikHillestad. This is an era when you could have gotten him. There's a whole bunch of players over in Europe. Obviously, Hortzer, you don't have to have him as your top player. Why can't you have Odoamne or someone along these lines instead of him? Like, it can happen, right? I know this is summer, so it's tricky to change players. But then, okay, let's go look at Season 7, right? Season 7 Spring, it's the one where Doublelift sat out. Now, you might say, Wild Turtle did well and they still won the tournament. Yeah, they didn't really win with Wild Turtle as an MVP, though. And the problem is, I heard behind the scenes, they did want rid of Doublelift and they were pissed with him. And he only came back because of what he went and proved when he played for Team Liquid and requalified them to LCS. And they were like, right, we better bring him back then so he doesn't fuck with us at this point in time. And he obviously won that game against them late in the split for Team Liquid. I actually think at this point in time, you should already have made the move for an EU AD carry at this point in time and then really force Doublelift. Like, look, we don't fucking need you. We've got this guy now. Because remember, at this point in time, only Svenskeren is your import. Also, you've been to Season 6 Worlds. If you want, you can make the Hortzer move now. Now you can go for an elite EU top. You can go for a Cabo Shard, one of these level of Wonder back then. Like, you can go for all sorts of players at this point in time. Then you come to Season 7 Summer. Doublelift's back in the lineup. You can still replace Hortzer, Biofrost, etc. Like, you can have a mad fucking OP team at this point in time. Now, one of the problems, obviously, is also, as well as the resident angle, Reggie, for some reason, just didn't believe in signing Koreans. Hence, the only one was Lusk Boy. And after that, I mean, he signed an Asian player now in Swordart, but that has fuck all to do with Korea. So as a result, let's think of some of the people he missed over this sort of time frame. He could have had potentially impact. Cloud9 even let him go eventually, but why weren't they willing to sign him in the first place? They could have had Someday, who was fantastic, even when he was a fucking Dignitas. They could have had Flame, who met them in the final in Immortals. They could have had Core JJ, who's been an MVP of the league a bunch of times and filled that crucial shot-calling support position they basically always needed, hence why they overpaid for Sword Art. Now, they did make in TSM some very good on-paper Western rosters that did look effectively, I wouldn't say like true super teams, but they had some of that quality to them for this era. Like the Yellow Star Season 6 spring team, the entire Best in the West bot lane for Season 8. These all lineups on paper, as in terms of Western talent, looked very good, but he never exploited having the Koreans. Now, another angle he didn't exploit using the imports in is he used the import for Svenskeren and then never anyone else for that particular role. Now, here's the problem. If I had to rank the best junglers during the Bjergsen era, not for their entire time there, but, you know, like their best split or whatever, I would go in this order. Svenskeren, I think early maybe, he was the best. I'd put number 2. I'd probably say Season 5 Spring Thorin. Actually, he was able to play the game in the team style pretty well back then. I'd say number 3 is Season 10 Summer Spicker. Thought he actually was pretty fucking good by the end of the split. And then I'll say number 4 is Season 9 Spring Acadian, the guy that everyone forgets about, who helped them get to the LCS finals and almost win the LCS title after that massive drought for so long. So even in terms of junglers, you're never exploiting the fact that this could be a super sick European player at this point in time. You're just using Svenskeren, and then Santorin was already a resident. So think of some of the players we could have had all across the positions. Top lane could have been Impact or Someday or Flame. These are players not only could win domestically, but they could go international and do it. They've already done it in their careers. Flame even went back to Korea and was like replacing Nagori for Dam1 and winning a bunch of games against like T1 and stuff a couple of years ago. For jungle, it doesn't even have to be Europeans, even though there's plenty of Europeans who are underpaid as fuck compared to LCS. Let's say for this one, you take the same route as Doublelift as AD Carry. Let's just get the best NA talent. So this could be a Smithy, it could be Meteos, it could have been Dardoch years before when he wasn't like fucking, I wouldn't say he's washed, but you know, the idea he's going to hit his super potential now. I think he's had too many years. He's just been in too many flawed lineups. Mid lane would still be Bjergsen, of course, but your AD carry position, it can be Doublelift, that's fine. Admittedly, he's had some issues internationally, but I don't think he was always the choker. If you want to go elsewhere, though, I know Forgiven could have been in CLG a bunch of times, including Season 6. It's just they kept disrespecting him like all the NA Orgs and saying you must trial and come temporarily because they were scared of his personality. But he's obviously a fantastic player, better than the majority of players to ever play AD carrying the LCS. You could have had Freeze, who was basically a less drama version of Forgiven. I know people are getting a bit, he's a choker. Like, you'd have to go and watch the games to tell if it was just him doing that. I always thought he was a pretty stable player, and for LCS, he was actually a very good AD carry level player. Could have had someone like that on your team. For support, a role you really needed, people, particularly imports. There haven't been many good NA supports, aside from Afromu, basically. Let's look at this. Man alive, you could have had Core JJ. Maybe you could have had, well, you had Mithy already. You could have actually had Mithy on his own, though. You could have had Hillesang if he would have come. You could have had Mickey X if he would have come before he went to G2. You could have even had Gorilla maybe instead of going to Misfits. Maybe he comes to your team, and maybe if he's with Doublelift or something, it actually makes sense because Doublelift can lead the lane and he's a vocal player. Like, you could have had some fucking super sick lineups. Like, imagine some of the ones I'm listing off here. Imagine a lineup of Impact, Smithy, Bjergsen. Actually, no, that's maybe, yeah, Bjergsen, Doublelift, and Core JJ. There we go. There's a TSM lineup for you. You think that one not only wins LCS but does something nationally, boys? Or how about this lineup? What about a lineup with Someday top, Meteos jungle, Bjergsen mid lane, Forgiven AD carry, and Mickey X as your support? That team would fucking style on the LCS and also be a dangerous threat internationally. So across the board, from residency to not believing in Koreans to not even stacking the deck and then having the extra bonus of having like a Doublelift or a Hortzer or someone who's a resident in the region as a top player, this could have been the most crazy level of dominance over this entire LCS period by TSM if they'd have clued in to what was possible, and where they had edges, others didn't have edges. This video was kindly supported by Eddie, Lager15, Pronogo, Shenlong, Zachary Carter, Alexander Rao, Andreas Kroknes, Animosity, Dean Tanglis, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, special thanks to my dude, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest? Would you like to ask a question in one of those monthly AMA videos I do? Do you want teasers on who the upcoming guest guests are, or maybe you want to take part in a discussion about esports with moi. Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.